Hi, welcome. My name is Dale McCluskey, and on this video I'm going to be demonstrating a foundational technique which is designed to bring the dog within the follower script when meeting other people, other situations, what can be defined as a socialization. So by using this technique, what's going to happen is you're building the bridge to allow for the dog to meet and interact within the context of the follower role. So to describe the technique, basically you're using what I define as a push and pull method. So what's happening through this method is that influence is being communicated. It's coming through the leash and through physical contact by way of the upper shoulder blade area of the dog with the pushing, and then through the leash with the pulling. It's coming through the collar. It's coming, influence is happening through the collar. So through this technique, what type of collar I'm using is just a straight collar, a flat collar, and that's designed to level out the type of influence, because really what I show is the power is coming through how you think. So it's a manifestation, it's an extension of how you think, and so it's mind and body, everything's connected that way. So we want to make sure we're on a influence happening because the focus is on relational change. So this technique is for dogs jumping on people. If people are coming into your home environment, this technique is going to build that foundation so that after you do this technique enough and it takes hold and the dog decision-making process comes into the follower script, then the technique, you don't have to be using the technique anymore this way. It's going to take hold and the dog is going to stay within that script, and people will be able to interact with your dog without any problem with jumping behaviors or any sort of a dominant type of interaction. So anyway, I'm going to be showing the technique, how it's used, but also too, when you do the technique, understand the goal isn't to choke your dog. So when you're doing it, it's like an elastic band stretching. That's the best way to describe it. And so as you're doing the technique, okay, there is a little bit of an awareness that has to happen as you're bringing influence over the decision-making process of the dog through this technique. So basically what you're going to see is I'm going to have my son coming out here in a minute, and you're going to see the technique in action. But as you're doing the technique, understand is the dog, people in other situations become a source of empowerment to the dog. So the mind is jumping. It's jumping over you. The dog's objectifying you. And so the dog wants to interact on its terms via pushing beyond the boundaries of the follower script. So the whole issue here is you're not going to allow that to happen. We're going to start to change out the script, okay, through this technique. And so, but the idea here is when you're first doing this technique, the dog is going to be somewhat resistant to it because they're trying to buffer it. They're going to be resistant to this level of influence happening this way. So when you first start off doing the technique, you have to be somewhat aware of that, of how close the person's going to get as you're starting to build on this technique. Because of the level of resistance, because the idea here isn't to counter the level of resistance with high authority, okay? Because you don't want to create a bad incident. You're building; these are building blocks, so you're creating the foundation. So the dog is going to you have to build up. The dog is going to accept this influence over time, okay? So over time meaning every time you're treating this as a separate exercise. So in that regard, you have to control. The first time you do this technique, the person may not be able to actually touch and pet on the top of the dog's head. Okay, the dog may be pushing beyond that script too much, and so when you're doing it, you have to build that bridge. So the person's getting closer and closer and closer, just calmly walking up, and because your focus needs to be on creating the script. Okay, so it's just peripherally you're seeing the person, but your state of mind of how you're thinking is that the person is coming through you. Okay, you own that person. So the imagery in your mind, you're saying to yourself is I own Dale or Jackson or whoever, and you're keeping that level of influence going. So, but also the technique is, this is important, is you have to keep that level of influence going. Okay, so the level of influence has to be maintained, because if you release it, okay, you're releasing the script. Okay, the dog is no longer being brought into that script. So when you're doing the method, it's pushing and pulling. It's like an elastic band stretching, but you have to keep it going. You have to maintain it the whole time of that whole interaction. And the other point of influence and how the influence is happening is that as the person's walking in, at the point that the dog is aware that the person's going to initiate contact, okay, that's the point you need to start to push and bring influence and do the technique. Now, as the person's getting closer, okay, you have to compensate, which means that the dog is going to be wrapping its mind around that person. It's going to be wanting to go outside that script even harder, okay? It's going to be somewhat resistant to the script. So you have to be pushing harder to compensate, okay? So you have to increase the level of influence. However, this is the kind of the trick to it. You shouldn't, when you're working out the levels of influence or how you're starting it and where it's ending if the person's making contact, you shouldn't be pushing so hard at the end that it's hurting the dog, okay? Or if you have to be pushing that hard, perhaps the dog isn't ready to be making that contact yet. You need to build that bridge. So again, there's a couple little dynamics there that you have to kind of be aware of so that you're working it out so you can be successful. Okay, that's key. So because the dog is only going to give you so much, is only going to be allowed to be brought into that script because the dog is going to be in the transition stage. So that's very important to keep in mind as you're doing this technique. And so the other thing is too is you don't want fearful people coming in to the dog. So you want to use people who just know it's a training exercise, because your goal here is to build the right dynamic so that everyone's comfortable, because the dog will feel that type of energy, people describe as energy, but those type of relational dynamics need to line up that way to make it, again, make sure it's a successful type of exercise. So again, take your time with this. This is something you do around doorways, areas that people come in. When people come in, the other thing is managing this is when people come into your home, if you're, have someone living with you or spouse or whatever, someone can be, managing the person coming in while you're doing this technique on the leash with the dog. So the dog could actually be starting off in the crate area, or so you want to set this all controlled so that you start to set this up so the dog is meeting people within the script. You want to build on it. You don't want the dog just rushing the door and going outside that script like that, because it's going to take you a lot longer to try to, because the dog's being empowered, it's being fulfilled. So we need to cut off that level of fulfillment, because this is why I call training an intervention. Okay, you're starting to create role change. You're starting to bring the dog into the right script. So anyway, I'm going to show you how the technique works in action. But what you're going to see too is the other thing is as you're bringing influence over the dog with the pushing and pulling, the dog's head should be turning in towards you. Okay, so the whole idea is it's coming through you. So the physical representation of that is the dog's head will be turning in. As you're bringing influence, the dog's head will be coming in or looking up as you start coming in. So the contact, as it's made, the dog's head should actually be turned in because it's coming through you. So it brings the dog's decision-making process over that line. Okay, it's like a definitive line running down the middle of your dog's decision-making process. Every time you create a moment, you bring influence, that line, the manifestation, the physical, is the dog's head will turn in. Okay, so there's clarity through this model. You'll see that interplay. It allows you to actually see it in action, so you can see it and say, wow, I can actually see the dog's head moving in. And depending on the level of power that the dog has, you'll see the dog will be in conflict. There'll be kind of like internal conflict going because the dog is kind of be resisting that. You'll see that interplay back and forth a little bit. Don't worry about that, but at the same time, there's, again, if it goes too high and the dog's really resistant, you have to just have the person come in so far, okay? And then just, the person will go away or whatever and come back in again, and you get closer and closer and closer. But the technique you got to work on. But it's a foundational technique. It's a technique I show people to really help with the dog meeting other people, other dogs, other situations. So your whole focus is just on it, whatever it is coming through you. That's how you're defining it. So anyway, I'll show you the technique in action. Technique is push and pull technique. So, like I said, he's looking at Monico's looking at Jackson. So I'm going to start to set this up. So just kind of push and pull a little bit first. Now come on in, Jack. Walking. So I'll maintain the push and pull. Just come in. Keep coming. Put your hand out to pet. Yeah. Go ahead. So you see here, I'm focused. Go ahead and do it again, Jeff. Okay, that's good, Jeff. Step back. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate one more time. So, again, basically, I'm not focused on the dog or Jackson that way. I'm focused on I own Jackson. So here, again, the dog could be hyper, could be coming out of that script a little bit. So all you want to do when you do this is don't have the person come in first. Just get the foundation set first, and then come back in, Jackson. Come on back in. Now start the push-pull, maintain it, maintain it, maintain it. Okay, good. Excellent. Good, yeah. Good. Good. Okay, yeah, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, all right. Okay. That's all right, buddy. Yeah. Sounds simple, right? Yeah, great. So there you can see the technique now. Now, for the technique, you'll see is maintaining that level of influence. So what it does is it's a positive experience for Jackson, okay, because he can meet the dog. The dog's in that script, so therefore the dog is absorbing the affection really at a deeper level because it's coming through a happy role. It's coming through that script, so there's no stress on the dog like that. What I'm doing is removing the stress, okay? However, there's going to be a little bit, the stress that's happening is a little different in terms of the resistance because, the dog is being brought into a different script. So the stress that's happening with the resistance level is just merely coming from being brought into the right script. Okay, so but you'll see what happened during the interaction there. Munigo start getting really calm, start calming right out. Okay, as start to transition. So actually, what I did was, and that's when you can actually decrease the level of influence happening. So I actually decreased it there at the point as they start coming down. So, but that's the situation where Munigo is ready for that type of script to be brought together that way. Because again, as you're doing the intervention, just be aware as you're doing it, just like using the long line method, you have to get to that point where you can start into that by way of some influence has to, or some role change has to have already taken hold. Okay, so the dog needs to be ready for that kind of expectations to increase that way. To increase, to what you're doing is you're tightening up the script. Okay, you're bringing in just like that technique. Okay, so you're bringing the dog's influence and decision-making process into the follower script, and you're holding it in there. Okay, so that's what that technique is, the push and pull. You're actually holding it in. Now, again, if there's too much resistance, then you're not going to hold it in. You're going to release it. But the whole idea is just to keep, again, the moments are happening. You just keep bringing the dog, and then eventually it just like glue. It holds in. That's why when you do this technique enough, okay, it just takes hold, and then the dog stays within the follower script. Okay, and then I don't have to do that technique anymore. So that technique is just just allows me to build the bridge, okay, towards having the type of dog that will meet people, other dogs, other situations, and stay within that script. But we're doing it through, we're doing it through this model. It's relational influence. Okay, so it's building on the relationship. So it's not corrective that way. Okay, it's not like the dog. What I'm doing is it's very unique that way. I'm actually creating the bridge so the dog can meet other people. It's very effective. It's a technique I've used for years. It's a foundational technique. It's very, very effective. But something where it's all psychology. It's all about how you think. So it's just a matter of practicing it. So thanks very much. Hope this was insightful. Have a great day.